Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video we check out A Plague's Tale Requiem. I probably said that wrong. Before we get started, guys, be sure to like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. You guys are freaking awesome. Let's jump right into the video. So A Plague's Tale Requiem was definitely one of my most anticipated games for this year, along with Elden Ring and of course God of War Ragnarok. I absolutely loved the first Plague Tale game, and holy cow, did they literally amp everything up from the first game. The game itself is just bigger, the story is more intense, and freaking the rats, there are so many more rats in this game than there ever were in the first game. Like, it is insane. So real quick, before we get too far into the video, I just want to drop a spoiler warning here. I'll try not to spoil any major like story elements, but there are a few things that I do want to talk about that are definitely more in spoiler territory, so I just want to drop this warning up now. So Requiem takes place about 6 months after Plague's Tale Innocence. And just like the first game, you play as Amicia, the older sister to Hugo, who is afflicted with a disease called the macula, a disease that causes the plague, and also allows him to control freaking large swarms of rats. Amicia and Hugo travel together with Lucas and their mom in hopes to find somebody that can help Hugo with this disease, and destroying entire cities pretty much in the process of trying to find somebody. Like, no joke, every time in this game that you feel like that there's a happy moment or a joyful moment, it just immediately gets flipped like a switch, and it's all dark and like insane twist happens. It's nuts. So just like in Innocence, where we found out that the macula was the source of the plague, in this game we not only find out that the macula has no cure, but also that it's killing Hugo at the same time. Hugo starts to have these dreams repeatedly of an island that's got like this phoenix on it with a two-peaked mountain, and on that island there's supposedly waters that can heal him. And this kind of like issue of Hugo wanting to go to this island is kind of where our party splits. There's an opportunity where they have a time to, like, Hugo and Amicia get to go their own way, and they kind of are stuck on a boat and they're forced to keep going down the river. And this whole time, Hugo's mother thinks that it's best to take them to the Order. Skipping over a few like important details, basically Hugo and Amicia find out that the Order has no intentions of actually helping Hugo, and instead they want to use him as a weapon. And they find that out when they get to the island. They find out that the Order is also on this island, and they just want to control Hugo. And that's kind of where I want to stop with the story. There's a ton more to talk about, but I really feel like that this is a game that needs to be played, and so I don't want to spoil it. I know the game's been out for like a week or so now, but I don't want to be the guy to spoil it to you guys. So if you guys haven't yet, definitely go play it. Come back to this video. But that's going to be it for like the story section of here, just because I don't want to get too much into the craziness of what happens in the story. Just know that I feel like that this is a game that everybody should play. I mean, obviously play the first one because this one won't make a whole lot of sense, but definitely a must-play game. Just know that the story gets really intense, and basically like the last couple of chapters had my jaw on the floor pretty much the entire time. I will say real quick before moving off of the story that one part that I really appreciated was that the killing and the death really have an effect on Amicia, or the character that we play as. All the people that she's killed or harmed in this game and the last game are starting to take a toll on her mentally, which I thought was really cool, because I feel like in most games, you know, you're going through and you're just killing the enemies and you're just clearing out areas, but they don't really have an effect on the story other than just to be gameplay, right? Whereas in here, it's like, yes, they're gameplay mechanics and they're obstacles for you to get past, but every time you kill somebody, like Amicia has a cutscene and Hugo screams for you not to do it, and Amicia just kind of loses herself. She just mentally breaks down, and I love that they acknowledge that, like, all these people that she's killed actually are taking a toll on her. And that's, I don't know, it's just like a little touch that I feel like a lot of games just gloss over because, you know, they're games and that's what happens. But I like how they specifically like kind of honed in on it. I know there's a few other games that do this as well, but I just really appreciated it here too. As far as gameplay goes, if you've played Innocence, you're going to feel right at home. Requiem doesn't really do anything to reinvent the wheel. It more like builds off what they've already established in the first game. Combat is virtually the same as the first game. Your main weapon is a sling. You do eventually get access to a crossbow as well, but because this is a survival game, I found myself not really ever using the crossbow, because the crossbow was powerful, but you only got, I think you start out and you only get like 2 bolts or something like that, and then the max you can get, I believe, is 4. I could be wrong on that, but regardless, I didn't ever want to use my crossbow, and I always saved it for the big boys so that I could just one-shot them. One aspect that I believe the game vastly improved on from the first game is that the stealth feels more stealthy. I don't really know how to feel like. I feel like I always tried to stealth in the original game, and I always got seen, always got caught. And here you could definitely sneak past a lot of enemies. And just overall, the stealth mechanics in this game, I feel like, are much improved from the first game. My only gripe I have with it, though, is not necessarily with stealth, but when you're running around and trying to run past enemies, that I don't even want you want to call it the grab box, where the enemy catches you, where you get too close to the enemy and it does like the hit animation of the bad guy taking you out. I just feel like it's too huge. There's times where I felt like I was fairly far away from an enemy, and somehow they still got me, and I'm like, what? I was not even close to you. So like I don't want to say hitbox, because it's not really a hitbox, but the radius around the character, how close you can get to them before getting caught. So one of the new-ish features that they added to the game is that Hugo can now control the rats. And yes, I know technically that was in the previous game, but it only really happened at the end of the game. You didn't really get to full on just like control the rats whenever, and you don't necessarily get to do that here. I think the first couple chapters Hugo doesn't control the rats, but there are quite a few chapters, I would say, for like the last half of the game. There are lots of sections where you can control Hugo to take out enemies with the rats, and I thought it was awesome. Hugo could technically like control them, but it's only for like a limited time. You see like a little meter kind of slowly going down as Hugo uses the rats more and more. But even with that allotted time, like you can wipe out an entire section with just Hugo alone. As long as like all the torches and stuff were put out, like Hugo can easily wipe out everybody. Another cool feature that they added was like this progression system, kind of. The way it works is that however you play in the game, whenever you get to certain sections, and it levels up based on how you play and how you handle each situation. So it's kind of cool. You don't really pick and choose which stats you want to update. It's basically like, oh, the game recognizes how you're playing and will update based on how you're playing, which I thought was awesome. There are 3 main like paths that you can upgrade, progression paths that you can upgrade in here. The first one is called the Prudence path, basically being stealthy, dodging around enemies, not interacting with them, not killing any enemies. The next path is the aggressive path, which is pretty self-explanatory. Basically, you just go in guns blazing. And this was actually the play style that I unlocked first. Like, I unlocked the whole tree pretty quickly. I tried to go in stealthy, and almost every time I went in stealthy and I got caught, I was like, forget it, let's do this. And I just take out all the enemies. Now, the final path is a bit off. It says the Malignant path. And I believe when you're in the game, it says stuff about crafting and whatnot, which is kind of like a false advertisement kind of thing, because it doesn't actually level up with crafting. The Malignant path is kind of a mixture of both the aggressive path and the Prudence path, where you kind of mix in being sneaky, but also taking out some enemies, but not all of them, and not being all sneaky. At least that's the way I found it leveling up, because I tried just doing the crafting and nothing really worked. This thing that worked pretty much every time I did it was kind of the mixture of the 2 other paths. So it's like the happy medium, I guess. Another touch that I liked that I didn't quite like in the first game is that you don't have to pick up rocks anymore. You pick up all the other materials, your alcohol, your sulfurs, all those types of things. But in the first game, you had to pick up rocks, and I think you can hold up to like 10 or 20 rocks. Here, it's just automatic, which is great. I hated having to pick up rocks or run out. Here, there's so much more enemies and combat parts that it would really suck to run out of rocks. Okay, so I do want to talk about the rats here for a second. The rats are freaking awesome. There is so many more rats in this game than there was in the first one. Like, this has literally like a horde of rats, almost like a giant like tidal wave coming in, but it's literally just rats. Like, there's so many that there's parts of the game where like it's like an earthquake because so many are coming up. And there's even parts where you're through the city and the rats, like once the rats start coming and destroying the city, it's literally like just this whole city is being crumbled and destroyed, and it's all because of rats. Like you're running away down like an alleyway, and there's just, it's literally like a wave, like it's what you would imagine a tidal wave would be, but it's just rats. And every time that happened, it was freaking epic, and I loved every time the rats were there. I was just like, I got kind of to the edge of my seat. It was fun, and definitely a highlight in the game for me. That, and literally any time Hugo rages out, just expect a giant wave of rats. Every single time, basically. Moving on to some of the puzzles in the games. I think that all the puzzles were great. I didn't think any of them were particularly hard, although there was a few that I was kind of stumped at, but that's just because I wasn't thinking about all the resources I had. Like there's this one where you have to shoot a arrow into the back of a board that attracts the rats, and for some reason I kept shooting like the fire in it, and I thought that I was supposed to stand next to it, because then a lot of the other times you stand next to the board, and that one took me quite a bit, but I finally figured it out. But nothing was particularly hard, and I actually enjoyed most of the puzzles here. They're all fun puzzles, I should say. But I do have to say that the peak of like the combat, the peak of the puzzles, was when it combined, like I said, the puzzles with trying to take out enemies, but also have rats at the same time. And there's quite a few sections where it just combines all three of those, and you have to solve the puzzle, or you have to get around certain enemies, but there's also rats around. And when it combines all three of those, it's just the best level. I love those levels so much. They're the best part of the game, easily. Which kind of segues me into the next thing I want to talk about. All the levels here, I thought were freaking amazing. Every single time you went to a new area, it visually looked awesome. I love this era. I love this time. And there's not really a whole lot of games that are set during like this really olden day France type scenery kind of thing. I loved all the beautiful set pieces. There's parts where you get up on top of a hill and you could see where the land touches the sea, like just beautiful set pieces. And then you have almost the exact opposite, still really cool set pieces where you're up on top of a hill and you're just looking down at the destroyed city and just rats everywhere. Like almost like the exact opposite of one another, but both were very spectacular, and every level was just amazing. I had a great time in every single level. A good balance of puzzles, a good balance of fighting enemies or stealthing around them. Almost every aspect of the game was just eye candy. It was great. I did play Plague's Tale Requiem on a PlayStation 5. It is also available on Xbox, and I believe it is on Game Pass actually right now, which is a crazy deal. But as far as like performance, I didn't really have any issues. The game is locked at 30 frames, which was a little jarring, I would say, at first, maybe like the first hour or so. But after that, I really didn't notice it. You just get used to playing games at a much higher frame rate, especially on PC, or even just the 60 frames. That the 30 frames was a little bit jarring, but I wouldn't say it was that big of a deal. Some people are making it bigger than it really needs to be. And then the other issue I had was mainly with fire in general, or specifically the times that I noticed it a lot is where the frame rates would drop is when I had a fire pot, and I would throw it, and just the fire going across the ground kind of made the frame rates drop some. And then also if I lit like the grass on fire, not always, and same with the pot. It wasn't always when I threw a pot, but every now and then when I did it, I would notice the frame drop. But it always happened to be with fire. So maybe that's the thing. But like I said, it didn't happen every single time. Another thing that's kind of noticeable right off the beginning of the game is that a lot of their faces kind of seem emotionless. And it's not for every part of the game. Like there's definitely some parts in the later game where you're like, okay, yeah, they got a lot of emotion to their face. But it just didn't seem like the facial animations were as good as some other titles were. I mean, they were okay for what it was, but it wasn't, I would say, anything great. And sometimes like the way that they were talking and their expression on their face did not match, and so it was a little bit of a pulling me out of the moment kind of thing. But overall, I would say that the game ran great, and I didn't really run into that many issues, and the few that I did weren't too bad. I mean, there could have been more, I just didn't notice it, and they didn't affect my experience or the gameplay. So final thoughts. This game is amazing. I absolutely loved it. Plague's Tale Requiem is a solid 9 out of 10 for me. Plague's Tale Requiem overall is just better than Innocence in literally almost every aspect in this entire game. The story is just so epic. They had, like I said earlier, there are so many moments that I just had my jaw on the floor because of how like freaking epic and amazing it was. Like I said, I don't want to spoil anything because I think you should play it, but there are so many moments like that, especially like the last couple of chapters. I was just like, I did not think that this is where the story was going to go. And it had so much emotion. Like the way that they told the story was just so well done. And that's just one thing I have to praise them for. The story was just well written, well executed. And definitely one of the biggest highlight for me in this game. Although, like I said, there were a few hiccups here and there with like frame rate drops and, you know, some glitches here and there. Overall, my experience was great. The game ran smoothly for, I would say, 99% of the time. Like I said, this game is on Game Pass, and I highly recommend it. If you don't want to spend the money for PlayStation, for the PlayStation 5 version, go play it on Xbox Game Pass. It doesn't matter what platform. This game was amazing, and I highly recommend it for anybody. Like, I knew that this game was going to be good, but I didn't think it was going to be that good. Like, no joke. I thought that this game was going to be around the same as like a 7 or 8. This is like a high 9. I don't think it quite deserves a 10, but I would say that this is definitely a high 9. I'm going to stick with 9, but I could see how people would say it's higher for sure. Definitely one of the best games I've played this year. Like, this is, like I said, I didn't expect it to be this good. That's how good it is. Like, this is definitely going to be a Game of the Year contender coming in December. I have no doubts in my mind. Before, I was like, it might, because the first game was pretty good, but I didn't think it was Game of the Year quality. No, this one is definitely going to be nominated, I think for sure. But that's going to be it, guys, for my review on Plague's Tale Requiem. Let me know down in the comments below what you guys thought. Have you played it yet? Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys on the next video.